Bonjour, everyone. Bonjour from chilly Paris in August. Give everybody a moment to join. I'm back here in the Cour Carré of the Louvre because today we are going to be talking about the opening of the Louvre, which is 230 years ago this week on August 10th. So, of course, to me, that is a very monumental occasion. Bonjour, bonjour. Thank you so much for being here, Jean. It is, as you can see, cloudy. I left my apartment and then I was worried that I hope it's not going to rain. It's not supposed to, but what it's supposed to and what it does, according to the weather in Paris, is two very different things. So I did not bring the umbrella. So we'll hope that we stay in the clear. But I'm starting back here in the Corcare because it's just a good, easy little place to start. And we're going to go out and around the Grand Gallery because we're specifically talking about the Louvre today and the opening 230 years ago of when it started to become a museum. And I won't go too much into all of the other good stuff about the building of the actual Louvre, but just a little bit because we'll do that another time because it's just endless. But what we're looking at right now, that right in the very center there is the Pavillon d'Horloge, and that is and this is also the Sully wing. So this whole entire back courtyard, the Cour Carré, is the Sully wing, and this whole entire top floor, the second floor, is one of my favorites because that is all of the French paintings. So all of the French paintings are here in this building on the second floor. It goes all the way around. It's all in chronological order, and it's really amazing. I love to go and spend endless hours in there just wandering around. Sometimes I have gone in there and it'll take me 2 or 3 days, so about 12 hours total if I'm going through looking at every little thing and making notes. Which, I've done this. I do this like, I don't know. Now I do it like once every few months, and I go and do it again every few months. But I learn so many different things as I'm researching and doing other stuff. So I could see something in a completely new, different way and explore even more about it, which I love. And I love to find that stuff. So, but here at to the left of that, that is known as the Allée Henri II, so Henry II. But this was begun under the building of Francois Premier. So in 1546, he assigned on August 2nd Pierre Lescot to build this project of a Renaissance Louvre, because that corner right there is kind of where the old medieval Louvre is. It is not to this exact specifications of the little square of cobblestones you have there, but it did kind of go into more kind of on the far end. The north side of the pavilion is kind of where it ended, and then it kind of came out and around. And so, if you go downstairs, if you come to the Louvre with me, I usually always take people down to show you the medieval ruins that they found in the 1980s. And that's really cool. And that's basically just right at your feet over there underneath those cobblestones. But the part over here is what went up first. And this one started to be built in 1560. And they started to build it up, and so this was the very first part. So this is the oldest part of what I like to call, quote unquote, the contemporary Louvre, but we're also talking about 500 years ago. Bonjour, Angela. Good morning. And so that there is the oldest part, and the bottom level there is the Salle des Caryatides, which is a beautiful space that I love to go into, full of Greek statues. And then it has the Caryatides that are by Jean Goujon, which well, I'll show you a little bit more about him later on. But it was started by Francois Premier. He died, and when he died, his son Henry II took over and had it finished, had it actually changed. The staircase that is just to the left of the pavilion there, kind of where it kind of juts out right in that little spot right there. That is where the staircase, the escalier Henri II is. And then just on the opposite side of that, the opposite side of the pavilion is the escalier Henri IV. So Henry IV, but the ceiling of Henry II, that staircase is the one that's really cool that you really want to see. The one of Henry IV, even though he is one of my favorites, it's not as decorated. Henry II, it has it's dedicated to pieces about Diane, the goddess of hunting, who was also the name of his lover, Diane de Poitiers. But that part, so that is what you see is the oldest. Once they built that, they started to kind of go out over here, and we're going to go outside and kind of walk along the quay to see the other side, to go walk along the Grande Galerie, and that is what they started to do next. And so, what would be then the Petite Galerie, which is what we now know as the Galerie d'Apollon, that building with the bottom side being the former apartments of summer apartments, I should say, of Anne of Austria. And so that is just right out here. And then it was the Grand Gallery that was built. So I'll show you out there, but we'll do another one because there's just too much. You know, I could just talk for about 25 hours straight about the Louvre, but here is the rest of that. So the second floor, you have the paintings. On the first floor, this whole backside is a bunch of Egyptian, and they've got some really cool, like the seated scribe, which is a real treasure, and some other pieces. This is also right in here is where you have the ceilings of the former king's bedchambers, which were moved from over here. Near the Petit Gallery, they were taken apart and moved into here, and it's really cool. It's all this carved wood. It's absolutely gorgeous. But you know, there's 50 ceilings in the Louvre that are painted. 50 rooms that have painted ceilings, and that's one thing I'm like working on. I'm doing lots of research on because I'm going to start doing it where that could just be a tour alone. We probably couldn't even do 50 ceilings in 3 hours, but that is one I'm going to start doing, and I'll do something to share with you guys too. Here's your little music as we walk through. I do love hearing the musicians in there. A couple weeks ago, there was a gal. It was actually on 14 Juillet, so on Bastille Day. There was a woman there with a boombox, and she was lip syncing opera. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And usually, when there's opera singers underneath there, which are glorious to hear, you know, it just belts out because the acoustics in those underneath the pavilions is so good. And it was just this very strange. I was like, "What is that lady doing?" And she was lip syncing opera, and it wasn't even, and she didn't even have like the volume cranked up or anything. It was a quite the odd thing to see. But the police have been kind of going through there, and loose security cramping down on people doing that if they aren't licensed to do that, because you have to be licensed to do it. And the part of the Louvre, because it is a state property, it's also could be private property. So that is why if you find the little crooks with their say clipboards, they can't be in around the pyramid. Usually you find them a lot of times in the cour carré, but they're not allowed around the pyramid. So here, this building right, this part of the building right here. Hang on, let me get. I wish I could just walk in the street, but we won't do that. So that building right there, that is actually Now it is the Galerie d'Apollon is upstairs. The bottom side is was the summer apartments of Vienna, Austria, and now it is where it's all Roman antiquities, amazing Roman statuary, but none of that is closed right now. So they are working on it. They've been working on it since before COVID, or it's been closed, I should say, before COVID. They haven't really been doing anything until now, and it's supposed to open, I think, the end of next year. They're putting in a lot of, they're doing a lot of work on like the HVAC system and a bunch of other stuff in the floor and cleaning up the ceilings because that's another space that has all the amazing, beautiful painted ceilings. And you see over there, over the door, it says the Musée du Louvre, Galeries des Antiques. And that is because even though the Louvre itself as a museum didn't open until 1793, it did have art in there going back to the 16th century with Francois Premier. And then in 1681 is when they started to put antiquities in that space right there. So while it wasn't open to the public, the art was in there, and more so than just saying it was a place people lived, and that's where they had the art. This balcony here, so here's the very end of it. You can see the plywood covering the windows down there. It's a place space I love, so I cannot wait for it to reopen. And so hopefully they get that finished and it could open sooner rather than later. But we'll talk a little bit more about that little spot there in a couple of weeks. Because that little balcony right there has a very, hey Sharon, that balcony has a very significant moment that happened there that led to the deaths of thousands and thousands of people. So you can see, so that there on the other side is the Salle des Empereurs, and that is also being all restored in there too. The gallery or the Court of Sphinx, Courtyard of the Sphinx, is also being restored. And when we go to the other side of it, I'll kind of show you when this was originally the museum, what was used for. But they just got done cleaning all of this side up here. Go up a little so you don't have to see the wall. So they just got done cleaning all of this, and it looks absolutely amazing. And if you really keep your eye out, so on the building itself are tons of initials, and those initials are of the kings and two emperors, but the and two in there is two in there that signify there's an N for Napoleon and Napoleon III, and then there is a LN for Louis Napoleon, which is also Napoleon III. But you see the H's, that's always Henry II. Some of them actually would take some of the initials down of their predecessor and replace it with their own. So in some ways you can actually go through here and track who did what on the building by the initials that are there. But then some of it is also who did what on the building and then who redid that part of the building. Um, so this here, this is where the whole entire Grand Gallery starts. So technically back behind that spot where it goes up, where there's a whole extra floor. And there's actually not a floor up there because it's just really, really tall ceilings. That is the Salon Carré. And the Salon Carré got its name because that is where the yearly and then every 2 year salon happened. And the salon basically meant it was in a gathering of artists, pieces that were members of the Academy, the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculptures. And so at first they were juried, and then they got to pick which ones they would have in there and then put them on display. And then later on, once the Royal Academy is broken up in 1792, that is when it became even more of a jury, and then it was a jury of your peers, but then those are the guys that went against the Impressionists. But you can see, so here's where the Grand Gallery starts. And when you're in the Grand Gallery, there are no windows. So on this side, there's a few of them here where you have the opening. But you can see back behind these windows there on the first floor, the first French floor. So the second, you would think it was the second floor in the US. You could see the backing of that kind of in there. You can see like the 2x4s and everything that are back there because that is just there's art on that on those walls instead. And right about right here is where you would find Leonardo. We have this great, this is the Cour Visconti. So this is where there's two courtyards here. There's the Visconti and the Cour Louvre. The Visconti, both of these guys were architects that worked on the Louvre. And the Cour Louvre is the one that's really cool because that's the one that has the really beautiful horse or horseshoe shaped um, ramp. I'm trying not to get run over here by the bus. But you can see up here, everything on here is a lot of this is mythological. You can see Mercury up there because Mercury is always easy to spot because of the wings on his head and on his ankles. But they did a great job. It's really beautiful. Sadly, though, there was one really, really cool thing here. And when they redid the restoration, it went away. So you have on that first between the windows, on the first, you have those kind of big rectangles. And on one of them that was down here far away, it had actually a sundial. Like one of the sculptors working on it kind of just sculpted a sundial into it. And when they redid it, it's gone. So that was kind of fun. This is a gorgeous, I love this one. Look at how beautiful this one is. Can I go out on that balcony, please? You have the crest up there of Henry II because on the left you see the fleur-de-lis of the Bourbons. And then on the right is those chains, and that represents Navarre because he was first, Henry IV was first, Henry III, King of Navarre, and then he became Henry IV, King of France. And I love that this is all finished and you can just really get in there and see it. But isn't that gorgeous? And underneath there, I don't know if I think we'll be too close if I go over it. But let me try to zoom in on this. So look at this part. See all the fleur-de-lis on there? So cool. And the H's. There's other pieces of it on the facade on the other side that is just like that, where it kind of almost looks like it's embossed onto the stone, and it's got little N's and little B's, and you know who those are for. If it's a B, it is Napoleon de Bonaparte, and if it's fleur de lis, it's the Bourbon. But you could see, oh, there she is. Okay, see if I could try to. So look here on the band. So can you see this one here? See the H and the H. So there's always the controversy, or I think it's controversy, of the Henri, and is the intersecting letters D's for Diane de Poitiers or are they C's for Catherine de Medici? We've all discovered, and I basically have just said, and I talked to my friend who is an expert on the Louvre. He's like, he actually agrees to me, but this one is an H and G. And the H and G is because it is Henri IV, so Henry IV, and the love of his life, Gabrielle d'Estrées. So it's G for Gabrielle. She's amazing. If I brought you in the Louvre before, I might have shown you the painting of her that everybody is always snickering at. You could always hear everybody of all ages snickering when they see it because it's the two women sitting in a bathtub, topless, and the one woman is pinching the other one's nipple, and it's because it's her sister. So the one getting pinched is Gabrielle d'Estrées, and the other one that's doing the pinching is her sister. And her sister, it is symbolizing that she's pregnant, and she was pregnant with the fourth child of Henry IV. She would have that child, and then she'd get pregnant again, and they were going to get married. It was after he annulled his wedding to, or the wedding to Marguerite de Valois, who was the daughter of Catherine de Medici. He was going to marry her, and then a couple days before they were supposed to get married on Easter Sunday, she died, most likely poisoned. So But so this is the Grand Gallery. So the Grand Gallery stretches from there all the way down to there. So it's very long. The Louvre itself, if you took it apart, stretch out, it's 11 kilometers. I've easily done 5 or 6 miles just inside, walking around. That was when I would first come in here and I just was like taking it all in and going everywhere I could. Now I go in there and I spend 2 hours in one room. So I don't really usually walk quite as much when I'm in there as I used to, um, unless I'm doing a tour, but it's very long. And so when the Louvre first opened, so when they decided to create a museum, and first it started in 1779. They closed the Musée de Luxembourg, and the Musée de Luxembourg was the museum at that time of it just had everything in it. And so, but then later it was very very tiny. Later it became when it reopened again. Later it became the Library of Living Artists. So Matisse and all those guys. I'm gonna go back here for a minute. Matisse and all those guys were in there. And so they decided to close that one. And so Louis the 14th said, well, let's move all of that into, let's put the royal collection into the Louvre, because what the Louvre had become too was it was the seat of the Academy of Paintings and Sculptures. And they thought, hey, well, they're still, while they're here, we might as well use that. Just 2 years before that, in 1777, he moved his plan relief. And so these are these really cool things, and you can see them today, and I'll tell you where. But they're these really cool models, and they're huge models of cities, and he would be using them when he was planning battles and stuff. And they were made, and there are ones of, there's a really cool one of Mont Saint Michel, but there's some of like the wall cities like Carcassonne and all of these other ones. And there was at that time he had like 50 of these, and they're really amazing. You can see them now in the Musée de l'Armée. There's a on the top floor of the western wing is where that museum is, and it's really really cool to see them. And so that ended up coming here first into the Grand Gallery, and they had them all in just these huge tables that were set up in all of these plans. I mean, some of them are really, really immense. But they first moved in here. Then on November 7th or 2nd, 1789, is when they passed a law that anything, if you decided to leave or emigrate from France with the event of the revolution coming, if you decided to leave, then it instantly meant that your property became the property of the state. And so they could go in there and take that. So that also had to do with other things like churches. So on August 10th, 1792, that same year, is when the monarchy fell. And so that was the day that it was, after the king and queen, Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette, came to Paris. They were here, and there was the storming of the Tuileries, and they went running through the street and were running over to the National Assembly, and they hid there, and then that's when they decided to abolish the monarchy. So the picking August 10th for the opening of the Louvre was very specific because it was a 1 year anniversary of abolishing of the monarchy. So on September 16th, 1792, is when they decree that they are going to open a national museum for the country, to give it back to the people. And honestly, that was probably the smartest thing they did, because the Louvre was once a palace and home to the kings of France. The smartest thing that they did was to give this building back to the people, because giving it back to the people meant they weren't going to do anything to it. So they weren't going to destroy it now, because now it is their property. So this side over here, let's see if we can sneak a peek into this window. This side over here is where the director has her office. She's not working today, it's Sunday, and it's August, so she's probably not even here in Paris, because nobody's here except for tourists. It's very eerily quiet, especially in some neighborhoods in the morning. Any given day in the morning this week, it's more like a Sunday morning in Paris. It's very strange. So here, when you see an L, It's not Louis. That's just for the Louvre. I love these little grates here. It is. I'm wearing my jacket. It's chilly. I'm going to come over here for a minute. So on July 27th, 1793, just before that, that is when it was a law that this would become the museum for the French. And on August 10th, 1793, it opened to the public. Now, when it opened to the public, it was a cry from what you see today. And even when 1939, when they emptied the Louvre, it was, a fraction in here of what the Louvre holds today. Show you this little part in here. Oops, go around. So when the doors opened on the Louvre was filled with 538 paintings. All those paintings had belonged to the kings. It was a royal collection belonging to the kings. And then it was also the confiscated pieces. So pieces taken out of churches to keep it safe, things taken from people that immigrated out of the country that fled, before they would get their head chopped off. All of that stuff became the property. But the majority of this had been gone. 3/4 of that had belonged, excuse me, 3/4 of that belonged to the kings of France. And there were 538 paintings, but there was also 48 sculptures. There was 39 of those were busts of, great men in French history. And then there was 29 tables filled with hard stone vases and pieces. And when I say hard stones, those are, if you go into the Galerie d'Apollon, and there's 3 beautiful, huge cases of glassware. And so some of it is actually etched, beautiful rock crystal. But then a lot of it, if you really look at it, it's called hard stones. And those are when they would have, and some of these things are huge. And so this was a huge thing that started in Milan. And then it ended up, it was actually a huge collection of Cardinal Mazarin. And then when he died, all that stuff goes to the king, which is also feeds into what is here at the Louvre as far as paintings and sculptures as well. But those pieces were incredibly valuable and worth a lot of money because when you see them, and I'll go in there and take you guys in there someday to show you, they are huge. I mean, these pieces are really huge. And so these were stones that they found and, rocks, and they carved them into these beautiful vessels. So though there was an immense amount of those in there as well. But yeah, 3/4 of the collection was all belonging to the king. And so it just went into the Grand Gallery. So that was it. And so when it was in the Grand Gallery, and this is when the windows were open, there was no light on the ceiling, there's no window on the ceiling that it is now. That didn't go in there until the 19th century, but it was just being lit from the side of from the windows that we saw that are covered up now. And so that gave some light, but there was less, there was fewer windows in on the inside. Now this whole part here, where you see this part that comes out, none of this was here until the 19th century. So the Grand Gallery was very long and just went around along this, exactly on the other side, but without this whole part that sticks there. But when it opened, you hear, oh, great, it was open August 10th. Well, kind of, the asterisk under that was that it didn't actually open to the public until November 18th, 1793. So I could really celebrate the anniversary twice this year. So, but it was open. This was during the Revolutionary calendar. Revolutionary calendar meant that every week was 10 days. A 10-day calendar, these weren't 10, 24 order, which had to be very strange as far as light, when it was dark and when it was light because if they're shortening the days. But when it was open on the 10-day week, it was for just copyists. So you could only be a copyist to go in there. And then 3 days it was open to the public. And then 2 days it was closed for cleaning, which, today it's still closed. It's just one day now. But it's first it was the copyists that's got to go in there. And you have everybody. There's paintings that Manet did and Degas and Henri Fantin-Latour and Monet and all of these people and Bert Morisot. They came into the Louvre and you just pop up your easel and sometimes they could even just pop off the painting off of the wall and put it onto an easel so they could get close to it and copy it. And to copy it, you could not, in their same rules today, is it has to be bigger or smaller than the original, and you can't copy the signature. And of course, this has to be approved by the Louvre. There's a 2 or 3 year waiting list on it. They walk you in, they keep the painting until you're done. There's a lot that goes into it, and I love coming across people doing that. But it was a very different situation back then itself, when it belonged to the kings, it was really Francois Premier was the one who first started collecting. And so Francois Premier is one of my favorites as well. And he is the one that really started to revolutionize the monarchy and turning it into something that was all about the culture and, and literature and paintings and everything. So he was the one because his mother was obsessed with the Italian Renaissance and raised him having, this well-rounded mind for a culture. Probably why I love him. He was the one who brought Leonardo to Paris. So he brought Leonardo up to France, and he was in Paris for a while, but then stayed down in the Loire where he gave him a chateau, and that's where Leonardo's buried to this day. But when Leonardo came, he came with 6 paintings. One of those paintings being the Mona Lisa. So he came with him, and so those paintings, Leonardo either sold them. He sold some of them to Francois, and some of them he just gave them. So they're here free and clear. They belong to France. A gift, from the artist. That's just kind of how it went. Some people still like to think that they were stolen by Napoleon, but it's including the gentleman that I did actually steal her off of the wall of the Louvre, but that wasn't exactly the case. And then Louis the 13th, he also between France, his son Henry the Second, even Henry the Fourth, they kind of weren't really into really collecting art. They really didn't care. Louis the 13th, the son of Henry the Fourth, he started collecting it. He was close with Nicolas Poussin. Nicolas Poussin was supposed to actually do painting of the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, and then that didn't come to fruition. He had this big rivalry with Samuel Vouet, and the two he got really mad at him and basically took his drawings and stuff and went home. So that didn't happen. And I've seen some sketches and some smaller paintings of what he was going to do in the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, which would have been amazing, but it would have probably had to be destroyed because now we have windows up there anyway. So the next one would be Louis the 14th, of course. But Louis the 14th, when he was amassing all of this art, he was amassing it because Cardinal Richelieu died and left it to the crown. Then Cardinal Mazarin died and left it to the crown. A gentleman that was born in Germany but then moved to French and became French, named Everhard Jabot. He ended up having this insane collection. And if you come in here and you go to the Grand Gallery and you just are walking through and reading every one of the plaques, half of them will say from the collection of Louis the 14th, and it'll say Ancien Collection Jabbar. So it was all stuff that he had that they came into the collection. But a good, I would say a quarter of the paintings that came into the opening were his. So I'm also obsessed with all of the different colors and who gave what. Louis the 15th didn't do a lot. He didn't really save or, go and get any of the art. Francois, his collection was actually much larger, but they didn't take care of any of these things. There's one painting that's here in the Louvre that is about David and Goliath, and it's a really cool painting because it's actually painted on slate and it's two sides. So it has one view of it if you're looking at them, and then it has another view if you're standing behind them and looking at it. It's the coolest thing. It's in the very middle of the Grand Gallery. And that was one that Francois had at the Chateau de Fontainebleau, and it was by a window, and it actually was getting ruined by rain when they had a storm and the window broke. So some of the stuff that they had by major artists just were destroyed, and they no longer exist, which is really too bad. But Louis the 16th actually started buying a lot of pieces. He had the gentleman in charge of the king's buildings. He had instructed him to go and buy art that was missing in the collection. So they had a lot of the Northern School Dutch paintings because Louis the 14th loved that. Of course, they had all Italian because that's what all the Grand Gallery is nothing but Italian now. And so he actually instructed to go and purchase a lot of the paintings that were, the holes in the collection. So those were the kings that pretty much gave the most, and then a lot of the churches here. Then you also have all of the pieces. Part was going around Paris and taking as well, and those were pieces that came into the collection in between 1808 and 15. In 1815, after he was ousted from power, a lot of that ended up, all those countries wanted their things back, and so they had treaties that they had signed and put into place that would ended up that a lot of that stuff went back to where it came from. Some pieces actually stayed in the collection, and if those are pieces here today, those are here. You have all of these amazing statues, and there's 86 statues around the building, and these were all added under Napoleon III. They were all put in place in 1870, which is also the same year he was ousted and went into exile. But you have up here, and most of these are all the Middle Ages and Renaissance. The latest gentleman in here died in 1828, and they did that on purpose because he didn't want to pick anybody that was his contemporary, to get anybody's nose bent out of shape. So he picked everybody that, most of these are 14th, 15th, 16th century, a few 17th century, but I picked a few of them to show you because they are and what they did. So here, this guy here is Philibert Delorme, and he was an architect. And what's really cool about these, and maybe I could try to zoom in on them. What's really cool about them is each one of them is done by different sculptors, and they are a lot of times like the saints you see in churches, like when you see Saint Peter with the keys, and Saint Genevieve with the lamb. A lot of these are actually also have their little attributes to it. So Delorme was a architect. He is the one that, with the snake, Catherine de Medici, designed the Tuileries and also some of the back Renaissance part of the Louvre. I'm not going to do all of them because we'll be here forever, but we'll do some of them another time too. This gentleman here, right there with the palette, is Charles Lebrun. Charles Lebrun lived from 1619 to 1690, and he was an artist. And so you have a lot of his paintings here, including these four, like, just massive, massive paintings, pretty much just as long, if not longer, than the Wedding Feast of Cana Veronese, but not as high. Oh, and now the sun's kind of coming out. But he did the entire ceiling in the room of the Galerie des Palais, which would then be the precursor to Versailles. Isn't this just gorgeous? Wait, we'll go back out. And then this guy did right here in the corner, Pierre Lescaut. And Pierre Lescaut is an architect. I just wrote about him the other day on the anniversary of the start of the medieval or the Renaissance Louvre. Pierre Lescaut was an architect. He started under Francois Premier, and then he worked under Francois Premier, Henri II, Francis the First, Charles the Ninth, and Henry the Third. So he worked for that many kings. He was the official architect of the crown for over 30 years until he died. This is the Pavillon Molière, because the Molière staircase, the Molière staircase is right behind there. There's a little cafe up there too. This is the Denon wing, so this is the wing that everybody's in. Okay, see, you can see that's the Arc de Triomphe de Carousel, currently under renovations, as you can tell. We are going to start to get a little bit better this week, but originally one day it said it was going to be like 98, and now that day says it's going to be 81, so I'm really happy about that. And of course, the beautiful pyramid. But look at that sky. I hope that's going the other direction. We'll come do this. Let me know if you guys want, because we can go do another car carré, and I'll go across the cafe that is there. You get in nicer months, sit out here, and then you get to be right behind all of these guys. Okay. Out. So Pierre Puget, and when you go up there, you can see it behind him. He's actually kind of right behind him. The third one was Perrault. Charles Perrault was the one who did the colonnade at the back of the building when the museum first opened, and it was kind of a controversy because it came from a church, and the gentleman that said we need to take these because we're going to take care of them and make them, they need to be restored. But really, it was just kind of no, they just wanted them. They wanted them in the Louvre, so they took them. And then where's Mr. Poussin? There he is. Third from the end, Nicolas Poussin, the artist I mentioned before, that it was going to do of the Grande Galerie. The next one is Mansart. He did the famous Mansart roof, but he also did the Les Invalides, and you see that right there at his feet. So this is the Pavillon Denon. If you go through that is where the lady is, the main Louvre. At the very top of it is, if something happens and I do lose it, then I'll record it. I'll keep going and record it and then put it on catch on YouTube. These ones are quite. They are in the process of cleaning all these back. 2019, on the ones that were where we started on that side of the building, they were. They did a test on them, spraying them, and seeing and leaving it alone for a year. It ended up being more than a year, to see treating them and cleaning them if it kept the grime and gunk off of them, and it did. So they have been cleaning all of them, and I think this is the last section because all the other ones look really good, but these ones are pretty dark and yucky. So later, when under Napoleon Bonaparte, they changed the staircase into the museum. Later on, when the third came into power, he got rid of that staircase and created the staircase that is now the one at the base of the most beautiful woman of the Louvre, the Winged Victory. And so when they did that, this became the entrance. So this was the entrance until the pyramid opened in 1989. They came in. Put the cherry picker up here 10 minutes. And the other day, I had people in there and they were in the corner. And so I was standing in the window, basically looking right at them. I'm not sure if they recognized me from the weird lady that's down below them. But here you have the Pavillon d'Amour. But back here, and this obviously changed over time because it does not look like a doorway now. But here in this little corner, this little offshoot, this was and still is the rotundum. So in this, and this is where they're doing work. So this is straight on the other side of this goes into the apartments of Anne of Austria. But this was the original entrance. So when it first opened in 1793, this is how people came in. So they'd come in here and then they'd go right a little, and then the staircase actually went straight up. So if we could go through that window right there, here's my big hand. If you go through this window right here, you'd be looking at the Winged Victory of Saint-Martin. And from that, you go up and then you go into the Percier and Fontaine rooms. And the rooms look the same, the ceiling and the columns and stuff, but that was where the staircase was. So the staircase technically they came in through this way, and the staircase went straight up. And so then that was changed under Napoleon the Third. But for quite a while there, this for about 100 years, this was the entrance to get into the museum. And the museum went through many different names. It wasn't known as the Musée du Louvre when it opened. It was the Central Museum of Art of the Republic is what it was first. It's quite a mouthful. Then it turned into the Musée Napoleon, and then later it was the Musée du Louvre. And the Louvre, I've had some people ask me, like, what does it mean? Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. There's no translation for the word. It is close to the word for wolf, and it is also kind of close to an Italian word that would have been fortress, because when the Louvre was first built, it was built as a fortress, then it was the medieval Louvre, then became the Palais, which you can see them all up there nice and clean. But here in the corner, the very corner there. Antoine Quasivaux, and he was a sculptor, and he did a few beautiful pieces that are here. And he did the Pegasus that are here at the end of the Tuileries. The originals are here in the Louvre, but then the copies are now the ones that are over there. And then right here on the little place of prominence, right there on the pavillon. So this is the other side of the. It says pavillon Sully, but we mostly call it the pavillon de horloge because it is a clock, and you see the clock up there. But right there, that guy there is Jean Goujon. Jean Goujon did all of these sculptures on the backside of this the Sully way. Basically here, this is the whole Henry II side. He did that, and then of course he did the amazing salle de carrière. He did the caryatides of the salon, which was the first major room that was created, of course, and that is just straight through those windows there. But he's just right up there, like that. He gets this little place of prominence. They also have these up above here. If you notice when you come, they have it says 1852. 1857, Napoleon III. Then it says, it basically unites the Tuileries to the Louvre, which that was actually done a long time before that, but because that was done by Henry IV. But he was the one who added this whole other side. And then here it says 1541, Francois commence le Louvre starts, and 1564, Catherine de Medici starts the Tuileries. Big N there, of course, is you know who that's for, Napoleon. But see, look at all these guys are nice and clean and pretty. But this whole side over here is the Richelieu wing. None of this existed until the 19th century, until when he started that in 1852. um, and which the anniversary is coming up for that the week after this. But he ended up building all of the, and so this was added much later. So when you think of this being the 19th century, it's kind of crazy. And this part wasn't part of the Louvre until 30 years ago. So this was all part of the Ministry of Finance. In 1993, it became the Louvre and opened to the public in November of 1993. So don't you think for 1 minute I'm going to forget that anniversary this year either. So, but that is my favorite beautiful building. But we'll have to go through that side. And I'll tell you more about all of these amazing people, all of these men that are on the building. They're the Pavillon Colbert, named for Jean Baptiste Colbert, was Louis XIV's right hand gentleman. And then the Pavillon Richelieu. Richelieu, of course, was the Cardinal. Denon, it was Guillaume Denon. He was the very first director of the Musée Napoleon. He ended up being the first curator, and he's the one who brought a lot of the Egyptian collection and everything in. And then the Pavillon Sully. Sully was the bestie of Henry IV. I've talked about bestie, but it really is kind of the prettiest one. But you have, those are caryatides up there as well. You have the N for Napoleon. You got Napoleon Bonaparte way up there as well. Up there, does it want to? I just always remember in the very first one movie when I saw this is what I really loved it. The movie starts and the pyramid, the big pyramid, is a little one over there to the left, walks there, and then at the end of the movie, she's in the Louvre, and then it ends. She flies up over that. I could just watch that movie just for those parts. So, but that is a little bit today of the birthday. So, okay, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you go and buy a little pastry and get a candle for the Louvre. I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do that day. If I'm going to, I'm trying to decide, maybe I will come, I'll definitely in here. And do I go into Angelina? Because there's Angelina in here. You didn't know that. So up there, doot, doot. And they actually have an outside balcony you don't let, I don't normally see a lot of people. I don't think they open it a lot. Um, but they at Angelina in the museum, which are kind of like, the offshoot, it's kind of like the Starbucks and the Target. It's not really a Starbucks, Angelina, but they're not really like the other Angelinas. Um, and and when they have it, so they have one in the Musée de Luxembourg, they have the one here, and when they do that, they always make a special dessert specifically for that. So the one here is they have this really cool one that is a all chocolate, and it's shaped in a pyramid, and it's like chocolate mousse and some bunch of other like a chocolate cookie or it's delicious, and then it has like little triangle shapes of dark chocolate around it. And so it looks like a pyramid because hello, it's a pyramid here. The one at the Luxembourg's really neat. Whatever this exhibit they do in the Musée de Luxembourg, they do two special exhibits a year. The Angelina there makes a special dessert that goes with the exhibit. Always really fun just to even see what it is. But maybe I'll go in there and get a pyramid. That's a pyramid. But anyway, but so there it is. So we're seeing here, you had to really basically what you saw in 1793 would have been this little corner here and this little corner, but none of this was here yet. Well, this beginning 1800s, Napoleon built this side just to that corner. That's it. That was originally a bibliothèque. There was a library, and that actually was set on fire during the under Napoleon III. So we'll have to maybe in a couple weeks we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that one about what he did here. So maybe even now. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed more about my favorite place in the world. And we'll have so much more. And so I wish I could go in there and show you, but it's not so great around there. So we'll do one sometime. Maybe I'll do one where I'll just make a little video and then post it walking into the Grand Gallery. It's still busy. There's not a lot of people as far as Parisians here, but it's very, very tourist. So the Louvre is still always very, very busy. But thank you guys so much for joining me. And I'm so glad you guys were here. And thank you. And make sure you like it if you are still on here. Give it a little like, or if you're watching the replay, like. And I will figure out. Maybe we'll come back here next week and talk about what Napoleon III did some more. That's what he did. He kind of did more for the Louvre than really anybody else. Some say he did as much as Louis XIV, but Louis XIV didn't do a whole lot because he up and left and didn't even finish it. And so it didn't have a roof for almost 200 years, part of the Louvre, because of Louis XIV just taking his toys and going to Versailles. So thank you guys so much. Let's turn it around, even though it's been very windy. Say hi. Hi. See, look, I'm wearing my jacket. August. I'm wearing my rain jacket, my trench coat. It's kind of ridiculous. Thank you guys so much for joining. And it was good to see everybody. And thank you. And I will see you all soon. Thanks, guys.